Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is brought to us by our Which Side Media Collective store. If you've listened to any of the recent episodes, you've heard us kind of talking that this is in the works and blah, blah, blah. But now, we did it. It's available. You can go there. It works.
Yeah. So it's our grand opening, and we're going to give you 10% off for being a loyal listener for the next 2 weeks. Just use code 2 weeks.
That's number 2.
WEEKS.
I love some of the designs we have on there. A lot of them are classics. You've probably seen them a whole bunch of other things. Some of them are unique to us. And there's a couple different ways you can just support the show. We have the bandana you can get. We have a couple Which Side shirts. And we also have the patches. So make sure to check it out.
Whichsidecollective.org.
And whichsidepodcast.com. Click on the shop tab. This is episode 155.
We talked to Rebecca Fox from Reasonable Vegan.
That's rvgn.org. They're a skeptical vegan organization, and they're awesome. I really like what they're doing. We have a fun conversation. She used to do tarot readings. We talk about that a little bit, and she promised to do a tarot reading with us one time.
She also wanted to mention that she incorrectly stated the URL for whatstheharm.net. So she said .com.
Hey Jordan, what news and events do we have going on this week?
Hanskanska will be happening during the Halloween weekend. So look up information on that.
I have the hardest time pronouncing that name.
It's a stupid fucking name and company.
For the Slingshot this week, October 27th, 2006. Indie media journalist Brad Will was shot by police in Mexico. If you like these little tidbits of history, you pull them out of the Slingshot Personal Organizer. You can get the 2016 one yourself at a local info shop or an online info shop like AK Press. I sincerely hope you enjoy this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
Can you hear us okay?
Ah, fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, great. Oh yeah, it's actually super clear. I'm always surprised when we are communicating across the globe how clear it comes across.
I know, it's bizarre, isn't it? My mum lives in Australia, and we Skype every fortnight or so, and every single time I'm blown away.
It's so crazy. Yeah, my wife talks to her mom in Colombia all the time, and so same thing.
Technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, making the world smaller.
So how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. It's like 5 o'clock-ish here, so I've had a nice lunch, gone for a walk by the seaside. Lots of wholesome activities going on.
You're just making me jealous.
Well, it is grey and cold, so there's that.
Still jealous. I love cardigan weather. That's the best.
That's a great phrase, cardigan weather. I'm going to use that.
It's perfect. You get your tea, you get your cardigan. That's the best, most enjoyable time of life.
Well, I'm a terrible traitor to my country. I don't like tea at all.
I'm sitting here sipping some beautiful Darjeeling tea right now.
Oh, revolting.
I'm sipping coffee.
So no tea, like really?
Yeah, I just never got into it, and I love coffee, so.
See, and I'm just the opposite. I can't do coffee. Too bitter for me.
It took me a while. I think it's like one of those addictions that you have to cultivate, or a taste you have to cultivate, maybe is a nicer way to put it.
I've thought about like forcing myself just to drink it for like 2 or 3 weeks straight in the morning just to get used to it. But like, why would I want to subject myself to such horribleness?
It's like wine or anything, those sophisticated tastes that you have to cultivate, and then you start appreciating them.
So
just cultivate them with cream and sugar. Vegan cream. And
Oh, yeah, that's what I did, actually. I started drinking coffee when I was really young with lots of milk and sugar, so...
So if I'm hearing you right, anything that is sophisticated just is like shit at first, but you'll get used to it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's like Stockholm Syndrome.
That doesn't sound very reasonable.
Well, you can't be reasonable all the time. You can try.
So you are you one of the founders of the Reasonable Vegan, or is it just a project you partake in?
I guess I'm one of the founders. Yeah, it's me and my partner run it mainly, and then we have lots of friends. Well, a few friends helping us out and contributing articles and things like that. So yeah.
So
I like to think of myself as part of the team behind Reasonable Vegan. That's what I'd tell you if you asked at a cocktail party.
What made you want to set out on this journey of like, okay, now we got to make this new organization just for this purpose?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I guess it starts with going to TAM, the amazing meeting, and meeting other skeptical vegans there, and thinking, oh my goodness, there are other people who think like me, who are vegan and who are skeptical. Why don't we have some sort of, I don't know, place to come together? And then becoming more involved in veganism and just seeing so much terrible pseudoscience and people being exploited and just kind of poor thinking habits everywhere, and thinking, well, maybe we should try and do something about this. And then sort of putting that out there a few times to see if anyone else would do anything about it, and they wouldn't. And so we thought we should probably do it ourselves.
How has the response been from the vegan community to your initial outreach?
Outrage. Well, one of the events that really kicked it off and got me saying, okay, this has got to happen now, is I went to a big vegan festival and I saw there a stall selling these things. They're called, I can't remember what this particular brand was, but they're called broadly balance bands. They're like these magic bracelets that you wear. Have you heard of them?
Oh, yes.
Are they the metal magnet ones?
Sometimes they've got magnets in, sometimes they're just plastics with little stickers with holograms on.
With holograms on, yeah. They do the little, like, I'll push you down and look how much balance you have.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's actually a really clever trick. It's called applied kinesiology. Mm-hmm. So they put the bracelet, or whatever it is, the magic hat, it doesn't really matter, on... They put that on you. Well, no, first they do the test. So they get you to stand there without anything on, and they push you on your arm, and they push away from your center of balance. They get you to stand in a T shape, and they push away from your center of balance on one of your arms, and you topple over. And then they do the test with the magic hat or bracelet or shoes or whatever it is they're selling on you, and they push towards your center of balance, which is hardly noticeable to you, but it means that you don't fall over because just, physics. So I saw people selling this at a big vegan festival, and it really, really annoyed me because I thought, I'm not a scientist, I'm not that bright, but I can see that these people are being tricked, and it's quite a lot of money, and it's something that's fairly well known, or at least it is among skeptics, how this is done. So I'm like, they're doing this trick, I know how it's done, and yet there's all these people falling for it and passing over like 40 quid for a piece of plastic. And so I got angry, and I spoke to someone there, but I'm not very good at face-to-face confrontations. I get a bit kind of shaky and nervous. So I thought the best thing to do would be to retreat home and send angry emails, which is what I did. And I emailed around all the other vegans I knew who kind of had skeptical inclinations, and they were all really angry too. And angry, I don't know. I speak for myself when I say angry. They were probably very sensible. And I emailed the people who organised the festival, and they said, the first email they sent back to me was, we're aware that there's there's a difference of opinion over this product. But we just let consumers decide for themselves. And I said, difference of opinion is that some people, they're doing a scam, and some people have fallen from it and some people haven't. That's the difference. You can't be promoting this at your events. And they actually got back to me, and they were much more sensible the second time and said, oh, well, now we see lots of people who have emailed us, which were all the people I contacted. and we'll rethink this. And I wanted to write about that particular event and how it made me feel, and kind of how it was a symptom of a bigger problem in the vegan community. And I wanted to have a place to publish that article. And so I thought, right, okay, we really have to get on with creating this website that focuses on a reasonable approach to veganism. And that's what we've been doing for about a year now.
You know, I absolutely love the fact that people are bringing more of the skeptic mindset, the critical thinking into veganism, animal rights, and other social justice movements. One of the things that I'm seeing, though, and maybe this is just me being super closed-minded and not really critical about the whole thing, is that I feel that the more focus that we put on the lifestyle aspect of veganism or the health aspect of veganism, and we push it that way, we get people that are coming in that are very only looking at one thing and trying to find that magic when there really isn't magic. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes me really frustrated when I see people promoting veganism as if it is magic. Like there was a woman recently who claimed she cured cancer by eating vegan. Like things like that are really frustrating because we're tricking people into becoming vegan, and I don't think it's fair, and I don't think they'll necessarily stay vegan. And also, it brings all these people who are going to bring other bad ideas along with them into the vegan movement. So it's just. But that said, I do think that, you know, obviously more people eating vegan, even if they're eating vegan or living a vegan lifestyle for not necessarily the right reasons, that is a net reduction in suffering. So I've got this kind of dichotomy within myself where I'm like, oh God, I don't want you bringing in all these bad ideas, and I don't want us to be promoting veganism under this kind of, you know, false banner. But also, more vegans is always a good thing. So it's like trying to balance that is really difficult. It's that classic double-edged sword.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I have a really hard time when it comes to, like, not necessarily, well, I guess like homeopathy and stuff like that, where you get that kind of thing in the community where people are really into, like, natural healing and I guess is how you would call it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like another double-edged sword because it's bad in so many ways. Mm-hmm. It's bad because people are getting exploited. They're handing over money for stuff that doesn't do anything, especially in the case of homeopathy, which is, you know, as everyone says, literally water. Well, not everyone says, unfortunately. But
it has a percentage of cayenne pepper in it.
That's so diluted that you can't find it.
It's like it's smaller than I think it's pronounced mole. I could be wrong, but it's smaller than the smallest particle that can be measured is left of that. So technically, it is nothing. It's smaller than anything. Once they've gone through all their diluting and succussing, which is when they shake it. Anyway, so the problem with stuff like homeopathy is obviously, so the people around us are getting exploited, which makes me sad and angry. I don't like to see anyone being scammed. I especially don't like to see vegans being scammed because, you know, we go into these spaces like vegan Facebook pages or vegan festivals or groups, and we think we're in a safe space with, you know, people who are nice and compassionate, and then we get scammed, which is really sad. Not that necessarily all the scammers are evil or, you know, out to get us. They could just be mistaken too, but it's still sad. So there's that. There's being scammed. There's being distracted from actual real medicine, which can cause serious problems, like people not going to get the chemotherapy they need or whatever because they've been told that they can cure their cancer with a vegan diet or some superfood or some homeopathic tincture or something. Mm-hmm. And then there's when it's actually dangerous, like there's this really prevalent thing at the moment called black salve, which is like it's kind of a salve that you put on your skin and it burns away cancer. So people use it for all sorts of things, but particularly skin cancer. They just spread it on. And then it's, I don't know the name for it, but it's some kind of chemical that burns away the skin and it leaves people with big holes. If you Google black salve, you can see what people have done to themselves with it. So there's natural medicine, which is waste of money. There's natural medicine, which distracts from real medicine. And there's natural medicine, which is dangerous in itself. So all of those are terrible things everywhere. And then on top of that, they make vegans look nuts. Mm-hmm. If we go around like associating with these kind of things, no one's going to take our message of animal liberation seriously if out the other side of our mouth we're telling them they can cure their cancer with water or whatever.
I need to make sure that that's not what my mom's using because she had some skin cancer and she was putting something on it that burned it off.
It was from her doctor, though.
Okay.
I know that. Well, I don't know what it was.
Okay.
It was like a chemotherapy rub thing.
Yeah. Well, Well, hopefully.
No, that doesn't sound like the same thing. But we're always worth checking and talk, because it's surprising. Like, I've had conversations with people who've said, I went to see the doctor and he told me this and that. And I'm like, well, that sounds a bit strange. I mean, what do I know about medicine? But that does sound strange to me. And then it turns out when they said doctor, they meant chiropractor or osteopath or whatever. Yeah.
So what is your biggest like pet peeve that people do to promote veganism that is just, completely inaccurate?
That's a really good question. I really hate all the stuff about curing diseases. That particularly upsets me. Anything about I think obviously there are benefits from cutting back on certain animal products, but I think claiming that that veganism is the healthiest diet, I don't think that's true. I wish it was, but I don't think it's necessarily the healthiest diet. We can eat chips and stuff all day long. So any of those health claims make me uncomfortable. I don't know. I think it's not really something that annoys me, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is the way that we tend to promote veganism almost completely on empathy, which is great. And it's a good reason why a lot of us become vegans. It certainly influenced me. But I think there's a lot of people who don't have that instant empathetic connection with non-human animals. And just because they don't have that doesn't mean they can't become vegan. You can just explain it to them as a kind of simple, straightforward, philosophical, logical argument about, hey, look, you care about suffering. It's a fact that animals suffer like we do. And so therefore, if you care about human suffering, you should care about animal suffering, and kind of lead them through in a more logical way instead of appealing to their empathy, which they might not have, or they might not have developed yet, or whatever. So I think we kind of miss a trick there in just going straight for the like, oh, look at the cute animals, which works for loads of people, but it doesn't work for everyone. And also by demonizing people who don't feel that immediate empathy.
I do see a lot of vegans fall back when they get hit with, and they're in an argument and they get hit with like a hard statistic or hard fact. They fall back on empathy as their only way, and really that's not a good way of falling back all the time. Yeah,
I think. I mean, I've got nothing against empathy. Actually, there's this guy called Paul Bloom who's writing a book called Against Empathy at the moment, and I've been obsessively reading and listening to all the press about that book because I think it's going to be really interesting and exciting. But I have a very close friend who is vegan, but he wasn't always. And we talked for a long time about veganism before he became vegan. And he is someone who tests low on empathy. So he did as a test you can do, obviously it's far from perfect, but it's what psychologists use when they're testing. It's called empathy quotient, the EQ test. So he did that test and he came quite low for empathy. And he's not a bad person. He just doesn't have that immediate emotional reaction that a lot of people do. I test average, which I was quite pleased with. But yeah, so it took me a long time talking to him about veganism to really get it through to him because he just couldn't. He was like, well, it's not relevant that they're cute. It's not relevant that, that they, he couldn't get that emotional connection. And it wasn't until I started breaking it down in a much more kind of rational, philosophical way and talking about, rights to bodily autonomy. I'm not sure I want to use the word rights there, but whatever. Started talking about those sort of arguments that he kind of clicked on and was like, oh, yeah, I don't have to love animals to respect them and not to exploit them. And I think that's the problem. Like we're saying, if you love animals, then you can't eat them. But what about the people who don't love animals?
That's interesting because I definitely feel like I fall in that camp where I can get an emotional attachment to like individual animals, like either companion animals. But as a whole, I don't really like animals. Like it's not the driving force that, I like cows, so I'm not going to eat a cow. I really can give two shits about a cow. It's just wrong to enslave them and kill them for their body.
I think that's a really powerful message. And I think it would get to a lot of people because I'm generally talking to people in the skeptical community or, critical thinking community. That sort of message gets through much more to them than appeals to emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But they're furry and cute.
They are.
No, and to be fair, I have met a couple cows in person and they have gorgeous eyes. Like, they really do. Beautiful eyelashes. And you're like, well, I don't want you to die. Like, it's nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, I had an interaction with a cow recently. We only have one farmed animal sanctuary here in the UK, and I went there quite recently, and it was the first time I'd actually had a close interaction with a cow, and it really blew me away. But that was for about 5 minutes or so. And then, to be honest, I found the company of the cow a bit boring because I like to have conversations.
They don't have much to talk about.
But just because I don't find them, the most stimulating company doesn't mean I think they should be exploited. And that's the main message.
I think the message is you should try to do what they're doing, which is just constantly chewing their cud.
Okay, I'll try that next time. It didn't look that appetizing, to be honest. But one of the things that Paul Bloom talks about, which I find really interesting, is how empathy leads us astray. Mm-hmm. So this would be a great example of it, the way that we respond differently to different types of animals, because it's easier to kind of feel that empathy towards an individual animal or someone who's cute or fluffy or has long eyelashes. But maybe it's harder to feel empathy for animals like fish or, octopuses, which they're so intelligent, but they're all slimy and gross. And so therefore, if we just let our empathy lead us, we might make the wrong choices and value some individuals over others just because they're cute to us.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, I definitely see that with the difference between land animals and sea animals for sure.
Yeah.
And then the difference between mammals and non-mammals, even in land animals. Mm-hmm.
I find it really hard to have empathy for insects. I just can't make that connection. They're so different to me.
No,
and I think a lot of people who eat animals have that problem with all animals.
I would definitely say I fall in the same category with insects. I've never felt any real connection, but it's not like I'm going to be, randomly killing insects here or there.
But I mean, the same can be said about snakes too and reptiles.
Yeah.
They're just
oh God, seriously, if I had to pick an animal I hate, it's going to be snakes. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I quite like snakes, actually. I
totally
held one
is.
when I was a kid, and it shocked me how dry it was. I remember that feeling of its skin, because I think as a child I imagined they would be slimy, and then ever since that I kind of like them more for some reason. It's I discovered something about you.
When I first got married, my wife rescued 2 ball pythons, and I couldn't even go in the same room.
Oh no!
It's just I couldn't do it. I know they're harmless. I know they're not going to hurt me, but there was that overwhelming sense of just stay the fuck away.
Yeah. I wonder if it's something kind of evolutionary, a fear of that's potentially dangerous animals.
It might have been. I never touched them.
I'll be completely honest. I think that my issue is I don't like having to feed them rats and mice.
Oh yeah.
I prefer.
I can't
rats
imagine
and mice.
that. That'd be horrible.
Mm-hmm. Because I like rats and I like mice. They're
yeah. I kept mice as a child as well.
I don't know. So this goes into the whole aspect of domestication, right?
Yeah.
So what is your overwhelming feeling on domestication?
Well, I think it's a really difficult question. I live with 2 cats, and I feel guilty every time I feed them meat, which I do. I've looked for alternatives, and I've tried alternatives on them, and I will always try the new brand of vegan cat food, but we haven't found one that they will actually eat. In fact, the last one I tried, they just threw up, which was really sad, and I felt really guilty. But I think it's one of those things that exists right now because of a history of all sorts of terrible things, and that will eventually not exist, and we just have to deal with the animals that already exist and are domesticated and not breed anymore.
I mean, when you think about it, I'm 100% against the continual domestication of animals, right? But when you think about it, pretty much every animal that we interact with is really domesticated, and people don't think about it. All the animals that we use for agriculture, they're all domesticated. They don't resemble anything like they would have done naturally. Cows don't exist the same, chickens don't exist the same, even pigs don't exist the same. Just through the consistent breeding that we have done and changed them. So it would be a completely different look at the biodiversity of the planet. But what I'd be really interested in seeing is if we got rid of animal agriculture and got rid of that domestication, how the biodiversity of the planet would change, because right now that makes up the vast majority of the biomass.
Yeah, well, hopefully we had a lot more space, and maybe we could leave some of that space for wild animals. So but it's a difficult question. I worked in a dog sanctuary for a very little while, really, in Indonesia, and they're kind of trying to deal with this problem of managing a dog population that is just huge and out of control, and they have they had when I was working there. I think it's not quite as bad now, but they had a problem with rabies there as well. And it's really hard, those moral questions of how to deal with those animals, because they will just keep breeding, and we have to keep catching them and keep sterilizing. And yeah, it's just kind of an ongoing situation, and humans keep on encroaching on the space where they live. And so, yeah, I think it's always like trying to just act and do the best thing you can do in the moment, and then moving forward and trying to keep the interests of the animals and the interests of the humans in some kind of proportional balance, because at the moment it's completely disproportionate. All we think about is the human interest and completely disregard the animals. So if we have our perfect vegan utopia one day, maybe that'll shift a little bit. Hopefully that'll shift.
I like that you brought up the aspect of like the sterilization, because that's something that's never really sat right with me. From the animal rights standpoint and, my standpoint of trying to be against hierarchy at the same time. It's like I understand the process and the reasons why and everything else, but just it feels wrong for me to be exerting that will over this creature.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like a kind of it's a bad solution to a terrible problem. Yeah, It doesn't feel good to have to do it. I don't feel good having to do it to animals that are like, in my care, but also I don't see any other option. So yeah, it's about balancing that kind of like your ideal moral values and then thinking about what you can do right now in the moment to try and look after these individuals. And yeah, it's really difficult. One of the things that the Indonesian government just wanted to kill all the dogs. That was their solution. So like having that kind of that's looming over us, and we had to make suggestions for alternatives and try and like, we're just doing ridiculous things. We're trying to hide dogs and stuff. It's really hard. I much prefer to stay in that kind of abstract philosophical realm and not get into that dirty stuff, because it's upsetting and it's complicated. And as much as you try and like be rational and fair, it's almost impossible when you get down there, like on a day-to-day level, dealing with real problems. And that's why I have so much sympathy for people who take different approaches to vegan advocacy and stuff. Like, RVGN tries to stay non-partisan. We're not endorsing like abolitionist or welfare approaches or any other kind of approaches. We're just trying to assess everything through a rational lens. And I have so much sympathy for everyone arguing their different points, because they're all just trying to do the best they possibly can. All this really complicated data, and we don't really have answers yet. So it's just, tricky.
I think the lack of being able to parse data or getting enough data is really hard for our community in general to have like the real discussions on what are the best tactics and how we should move forward to make those proper decisions.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's two problems. I mean, one of the problems is kind of just a lack of critical thinking skills, which is not just a problem for vegans. Obviously, it's a problem for everyone. And the other one is not enough data, which is, I don't know when we will have enough, but I just look at this, especially sociological studies, and I think this is, my dad always used to have this horrible saying that really annoyed me, but I find myself thinking of it often recently, which is you can prove anything with facts. And I just like everyone's bringing out their favorite study that proves the way they're doing it is best. But they all contradict each other. And it's just, I think we're just in a really early stage of researching the best ways to do vegan outreach, and we don't know yet. It's that simple. So we just have to do our best.
See, but that's what I love about like utilizing things like the scientific method, where you have two things that contradict each other. You just need to develop more theories and more studies and more ways of testing it to eliminate possibilities.
Yeah, I'm really positive that if we keep going down this road where we take a kind of sensible, evidence-based approach to figuring out the best kind of advocacy, we will eventually come up with maybe like a small suite of approaches that we know work really well, and then we can just push those forward. But I just think we're in a stage now where there's too much chaos and there's not enough data to rely on, so we don't know yet. But I think that's happening, and I think that groups like like the Humane Society, the people who are gathering data there, which has its own problems, but they're gathering data. There are a lot of people who are genuinely committed to getting those facts, and then it'll be up to us to pass them and hopefully come up with some solutions.
Let's hope it's armchair activism. That way we can do anything.
Let's hope it's Twitter. If we could change the world with just one tweet, that would be perfect. Just the perfect tweet, though, engineered.
It has to be really good.
You know what? I will start working on what exactly 140 characters we need for that.
Okay, good. You do that. I'll work out the font. And you can do the curving.
And we might need to mix in just the right amount of emojis.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Yes. Maybe that cat one.
Yeah.
I find that quite effective.
One of the things that I find when I talk to people in the skeptic community in general is that they can get behind the idea that, you know, you can be just as healthy on a vegan diet as any other diet. And they can get behind the fact that, you know, animals with central nervous systems feel pain and have, you know, sentient creatures. But what I have a really hard time with is when they start talking about animal models and vivisection. Because they play the whole idea of, well, you know, it's just the whole speciesist idea of, well, it's either them or us kind of an idea.
Yeah.
How do you approach it when you get to that point?
Well, generally I don't. It's quite simple. Like, I think that if you look at the numbers, the amount of animals being exploited for animal testing are really small compared to animal agriculture. If they can all get on board with the animal agriculture thing, then I say, well, just do that and we'll talk about the animal testing later. And just put it off the board, because otherwise they use that as an excuse to not do anything.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's ridiculous. So if you can get them to agree about food and animal agriculture and, you know, non-medical animal testing and leather and all those byproducts, that's a massive win. And I think that's really good. And then once they've already committed to all that stuff, maybe you can have a conversation later down the road about animal testing. And I think one of the problems that we have with animal testing is there's this tendency to say it's morally wrong and it doesn't work anyway, and that's all we say about it. And I don't think that's true. I think it is morally wrong, but I think in some cases it works, and puts you in a really hard position, because until we develop alternatives to a lot of the different tests they do, you have to admit, I'm asking you to give something up, and it's something really big for humanity that I'm asking you to give up, because I'm asking you to adopt a new attitude towards animals and to challenge your own speciesism. And that's really, really difficult. But to make out like it's an easy choice for them to make, and that to walk up to someone who's educated in science and to tell them that animal testing doesn't work, that's just going to make their blood boil, and that's going to make you look silly. And I think it's really important to just have that kind of like humility to be like, okay, it has done a lot for humankind, but that doesn't mean it's right. And approach it through that direction. But I am well aware that this is not a very popular way to approach it. And I've spoken to lots of other animal advocates who think I'm an apologist for animal testing, which I guess I am in a way, because I don't think these people are evil. I think they genuinely want to make the world a better place. So
one of the hard things I have when it comes to this situation is whenever I find myself wanting to bring up Nazis in an argument, I feel like I'm losing the argument.
Yeah.
You know, like if I have to come to the most horrible thing I can think of to win an argument, then I'm already losing that argument, because they're not going to take me seriously. But one of the things I always like to think about and talk to people about is that pretty much all of the knowledge that we have on hypothermia was done with Nazi testing on Jews. Like, they were pretty much the only ones that really studied it in depth, and all of our knowledge comes from that. And that, I always feel so bad, like, using that as an argument, like, well, yes, we have all this knowledge now, but we wouldn't have had it unless these people didn't do these horrible things. Is that justify those horrible things?
I think that's a great example. I know what you mean about bringing up Nazis or Hitler, always making your argument seem a bit weak, but it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, there are all sorts of things which are amazing and do great stuff for in the world, which were brought about by horrific cruelty to humans, to animals, you know, like, that's just the truth. And you can't back justify horrific acts because it's had a good outcome. That's not good reasoning. That's not good thinking. And that's actually a really good way to approach it with kind of skeptics. I'm going to borrow that and use that, because they will recognize that is a silly argument to say, oh, well, we should all throw out our Geiger counters because, you know, they were developed by Nazis or whatever. They'll say, that's ridiculous. And then you can bring them on and say, well, this is a kind of similar thing, what I'm getting at with the animal testing. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, I like that you bring up the fact that like sometimes animal testing does work, because as activists we like to point out all of the famous cases where it doesn't work. Like, let's take like penicillin, for instance, right? It clearly didn't work in that case, and it was, didn't bring onto humans usage because of animal testing for I think like 20 years or something, wasn't it? I could be way wrong on that date, by the way, so don't quote me on that. But a long time, I know that. And so we point out all these instances of where it doesn't work, but I think we fell when you say it never works, because it clearly does work sometimes, because we have made advances.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually got the chance to interview someone who works for the Dr. Hadwin Trust. They're an amazing charity. They're based in the UK, and they're developing alternatives to animal testing. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really cool to talk to her and to talk about. They're doing crazy, amazing, interesting things with computer models and all sorts. It's way beyond my comprehension, but it's fascinating. And so I think, I've got a lot of hope about what's being developed, but I think it's unrealistic to think that we have alternatives now, and that we might not ever have alternatives to everything. But that's not the issue. Like, it's kind of like saying, I can't go vegan until they invent a perfect replica for blue cheese. I used to love blue cheese. If I'd been waiting for the perfect replica for blue cheese, I'd still be waiting. Like, it's not a case of making replicas for everything, making alternatives to everything. It's just acknowledging the underlying arguments and then making your choices based on those. And sometimes they're really hard choices. And that's why the whole animal testing thing is one of the hardest choices, especially for anyone who's, had experience with someone in their family having to suffer through some horrible illness and getting relief or not getting relief from medicine which was tested on animals. Like, to tell them that they have to give that up, and we have to give up some aspects of medical progress, that's a really bitter pill to swallow. And I think to pretend that it's not really a problem is disingenuous, and I think it makes us seem like ill-informed and kind of like we're trying to trick people, which is exactly what I was saying about the health thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't like the idea of tricking people, even if it works.
I think it's funny that you brought up the idea that you really liked blue cheese. I feel super lucky that I never got into things like cheeses before I went vegan. I was way too young. I mean, so my experience with cheeses was just like cheddar and mozzarella.
Blue cheese never looked good, though. It was blue.
Yeah, for me as a kid, it never looked good. So...
Well, I'm glad you guys don't have to resist that temptation. I have the same thing with meat. I gave up meat so young that the only meat I ever ate was like fish fingers, and that's pretty much it. So I can't remember ever eating a steak or like an actual bird or anything like that.
So what is your origin? What brought you to being vegetarian at so young? Then what brought you to veganism? And then, to me, what I like to hear is what brought you to activism in general.
Okay, well, my mum was a vegetarian. And I kind of had this idea when I was a kid that she was a vegetarian because she cared about animals. But I've spoken to her now as an adult, and she says it's all about health, which is maybe just a way to deflect my vegan arguments. I'm not sure. But anyway, so I grew up in a household where we were eating a lot of vegetarian food. And my brother was a very picky eater. He never ate meat at all that I can remember. He used to, well, no, that's not true. He would eat the incredibly processed, like fish fingers and stuff, but he wouldn't eat meat. And my mum did most of the cooking, so I ate mostly vegetarian. And occasionally, me and my dad would go and get burgers. Like, we'd go to the supermarket and they'd come in like a plastic pack with the cheese and the patty and even the bread all in this one plastic pack. And then he'd bring that home and cook it for the two of us as a special treat because we were like the meat eaters in the house. But he would always go to the supermarket and buy it and then bring it home and be cooking it before I realised what was going on. And then one day we were in the supermarket together and he was like, let's get these. These are our favourites. And I looked at it and I saw it was like red, gross meat. And that kind of, so I'm about 10 and that's clicking in my head like, that doesn't look like what I eat. That doesn't look like the delicious round brown thing in a bun. That looks like meat. That's kind of gross. And about that same time, I saw an advert on TV. It was like Christmas time, and I don't know what the advert was for. Maybe it was for vegetarianism, or it might have been like a humorous ad that was actually trying to advertise turkey. But it had like a big cooked turkey on the screen, and then a little chick came up to it and looked up at it, all sad, and went, "Mummy?" Like a little question mark, and it cheeped, and I was just like, "Oh, this is too horrible." And so those two things, like, I'm sure there was lots of other things, but those two things sort of came together in my mind. And I was like, okay, I have to cut out this meat eating stuff. And I did. And it stuck. But I never really made the connection with any other. I'm sure a million people say this. I never made the connection with dairy, eggs, any of those things. For years and years and years, I was just a vegetarian, and I thought veganism was too extreme, and I like cheese too much to give it up, and all that sort of thing.
You're not killing the animal, that kind of...
Exactly, yeah, and I never looked too much into it, which is really interesting, because I think that's like there's some kind of bias in you which says don't look any further into this subject, because if you do, you will have to make big changes to your life. And so you just kind of erect the shield around yourself, the shield of ignorance. But then, so I was kind of, and I was a bit of a, I don't know, I guess a bit of a woo when I was younger as well. So I was Wiccan. I had all sorts of strange beliefs about demons and things. Yeah, it was a kind of weird world I lived in. And then when I started to get into skepticism in my early 20s, and those sort of ideas developed, and I started thinking about things more rigorously, I gave up my religion, and I gave up a lot of strange thoughts, and I gave up a lot of the kind of weird things that I'd learned at university about postmodernism and moral relativism. And then eventually on the chopping block, so to speak, was vegetarianism. And I started thinking critically about that. And I was like, oh, this doesn't make sense at all. Oh, no. And yeah, and then I went vegan. So I feel like maybe that's why I'm so into promoting critical thinking, is because I see it, that's what brought me to veganism.
Were you raised in a religious household at all?
No, I was raised atheist. But as it was a kind of chaotic, especially in my teenage years, it kind of got chaotic, and my parents remarried, and I was kind of moved around a bit and thrown in with other kids from other families and stuff. And it was all scary and difficult. And I think I really wanted control and to feel safe. And where I found that safety and a sense of control was in the ideas of Wicca, which is like, I guess you guys are familiar with it. It's kind of like a nature religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of, and because you've got magic, so you have control, you have the idea of being part of nature, which is lovely, and you have a framework for thinking, and you also have a community of other Wiccans, and it made me feel really like I belonged somewhere, and that I had control, and I had secret knowledge that made me important and special, which wasn't a message I was getting at home. So it was really, really appealing. And I still I think of myself sometimes as like a cultural Wiccan, because I still I love going for walks in the woods and celebrating on Halloween and May Day and things like that. So
that's really interesting. When I was younger and I started to explore other religions, I was raised in a very religious family, and my parents were very open to me exploring in other religions except Wiccan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I remember I brought home like a book on Krishna from the library. I brought home a book on Buddhism, a book on Wicca, and then I can't remember what else. And my dad was furious. He's like, I don't care about the other ones, but not this one. This one's evil. I'm like,
because they thought it was Satanism.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
It's a kind of classic link. It makes sense in a way. Like a lot of it's a long and complicated story, but it's not that. It's not as long as people think. Wicca was kind of invented in the 1940s, but a lot of the stuff from the original Wiccan text is drawn from what's his name, Aleister Crowley, who was kind of involved with the Satanists as well. So they kind of took the nicer bits of Satanism, mixed it up with some old folklore, and created this thing. So although obviously it's not, Wiccans hate it when you say there's a connection, but there definitely is a connection, and a lot of the language is similar, and a lot of the rituals and the symbology is similar. So yeah. Plus, I think I don't know that much about Satanism, but I think when I've spoken to people who are serious Satanists and not just trying to be, perverse and exciting, they say things like, when we don't believe in God or the devil, we just celebrate, freedom and human autonomy,
like humanism.
All those sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah. What's ironic about my dad now is that he doesn't identify like with the Wiccan culture, but he definitely is kind of immersed in it a lot. He makes like wands for Wiccans and a whole bunch of other things.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, I get that. I think as far as religions go, it's one of the least harmful ones, although I really don't like the kind of magical thinking that goes with it. I think that's potentially dangerous and disempowering as well, because it kind of gives you a false sense of power. And
I definitely looked into that when I was like leaving the religion that I was raised, and then alchemy as well was another one that I was really into.
Ooh,
I remember when you were into alchemy.
Yeah. Like But he's known me forever. So.
Yeah, one of my best friends was also Wiccan. We were like working partners, is the way it's termed. And he was really into chaos magic, which was really complicated and just amazed me when I was a kid. And now I'd love to get hold of some of the old books, because he is now complete atheist and kind of got over it. But it's interesting.
What brought you from like I'm going to be vegan to that step into now I need to be an activist? Like now I actually need to do something about being vegan.
I don't know. I'm kind of hesitant to call myself an activist.
Okay.
I guess maybe I am like an armchair activist, because all I really do is write and talk and hand out leaflets every so often. But the leaflets are about skepticism more than veganism, so I'm not sure I could call myself. I don't know. I feel like activist is like it's like a badge of honor that I'm not sure I'm comfortable wearing yet. But it's mainly like I got involved with skepticism first, and I got angry and upset about all sorts of things that I saw, like, particularly upsetting to me is anything to do with psychics, telling people, making up messages from dead people and things. And that's really upsetting to me, because I used to read tarot cards. I never did psychic stuff, but I used to tell people their future, not professionally, but just for fun. And I know how that happens and how you can kind of trick yourself into thinking that you can do that stuff. And that really upset me. And I think what upsets me particularly about that is the way it disconnects people from other people. So you have to go to this like oracle to get the truth about what your father thought or about your future or whatever, instead of just talking to your friends and making like connections with your peers and rely on each other for support. So I kind of wanted to get involved in that. And I was talking to a lot of people about it and thinking about educating people about cold reading and all sorts of things like that. And then I was like, this is important to me, but compared to how much animal issues are important to me, this is tiny. This is kind of like a hobby. And then I started thinking about what I could potentially do. And I don't have necessarily the skills to go out and just to be an activist in that kind of like organizing protests or, standing up and talking professionally or anything. So, and that's where RVGN sort of came in, to find a way to sort of, the idea is to challenge bad thinking inside veganism to make veganism stronger. And then hopefully we will start producing stronger activists. So maybe I'm trying to train activists instead of be one. I don't know.
Don't discredit yourself at all. You are doing a huge thing in getting active in fighting for a cause, and that's all activism really is. Everyone needs to find what they feel is best suited for them in that. And there's nothing wrong with that. So don't discredit yourself because you're not locking yourself to a building or anything.
That's really sweet of you to say. I feel like there are certain types of activism which are kind of like treated as real activism, and then there are certain types that are not. And unfortunately, I'm not good at the types that are treated as activism. So I just have to work with what I've got, which is, I've got a lot of time to research stuff, and I've got an okay writing style, so that's what I'll stick to. But I would like to get more involved. We made these, I think, actually. Dave from Pythagorean Crank mentioned it when he spoke to you on this podcast. We made these leaflets promoting critical thinking amongst vegans, which are based on his leaflets, but they're kind of a rework of it to appeal to a British audience, because he used a pun that doesn't work here. It was bologna isn't vegan, but we don't call bologna. I think it's called I don't know how to pronounce this word. It's like bologna or something. Anyway, we don't have that here. We don't call it baloney, and we don't have we don't call bullshit baloney. We call it bullshit. So anyway, so I had to remake those leaflets, and getting out and handing those out to people and talking to vegans about critical thinking is really exciting and fun. So yeah, maybe I do have a more active activist route in my future.
I would love it if in different vegan conferences or things like that, where they would actually talk about how a lot of these things work, like how cold reading works and how they pull these things off, and how to kind of engage that little bit more of critical thinking in your everyday life as activists. I think it would be hugely beneficial to everyone.
I think it definitely would, and I think vegans have so much potential for it, because we have already thought critically about something. We've thought critically about animal agriculture. Like, we've proved that we have that skill and that we're curious, and then we've come up with a solution, which is veganism, and then we put it into action. So we have all those skills. It's just applying them across the board and kind of honing the skills of like being able to find figure out what's good evidence and what's not, and find reliable sources, and then having that commitment to constantly testing the conclusions we make from that evidence. So it's like, making observations of the natural world. This is the kind of the classic scientific method, and then making a hypothesis based on those observations, and then constantly going back and testing that information. And I think that if we encourage that within veganism, we make our arguments for veganism stronger. And if we encourage that among vegans, then we make ourselves better advocates, potentially. So I think it's really, really valuable.
Do you think that a lot of people, why do you think that some people fall for things like, even if they're the ones doing it, like doing Barnum effects or cold reading, that they actually believe that they are capable of doing, having special powers?
I think it really depends which thing, because there's lots of different biases, cognitive biases and tricks that our brains play on ourselves. I think basically our brains aren't evolved to think critically. They're kind of lazy. They're evolved to use the least amount of energy to get us, to mate and then pass on our genetic package to the next generation. That's what we're evolved to do. And we're not evolved to be able to. So there's all sorts of little shortcuts that our brains take all the time, which make sense and are helpful, but they're not helpful in the goal of actually understanding the world. They're only helpful in furthering our evolutionary line or our genetic line, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I think the thing with like cold reading, because I have some personal experience with that, I'll just focus on that. It's for me, when I was reading people's tarot cards, I just have quite good people reading skills. I guess what you might call intuition, and I can talk kind of fast and brush off things that don't make sense and keep on saying things. Mm-hmm. And I was doing that a lot to people I cared about, and they were happy about it. And there's no explanation for that other than magic that is quickly accessible, or at least there wasn't when I was doing it. And so it was nice to believe that I had this magical skill and not that I was doing a really complicated and strange thing that people can do. And so it's like, it's the easy answer to just go, well, it's magic, and then move on. And I think that's often it. It's just our lazy brains saying, well, it's easier to believe magic because magic, instead of analysing all the really complicated and, contradictory things that are actually going on there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that, like, the reason why astrology works for a lot of people is just because they're blanket Barnum statements that they apply to anybody if you really get down to it.
I think a lot of that stuff... Sorry.
Oh, I'm just saying, does that kind of come into play as well, or?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff is just we don't realize how similar we are. So you can say things to people like, "Oh, you're surrounded by people, but you feel really alone. Like there's something deep inside you that feels kind of lonely and awkward, and like, are you ever going to fit in?" And you're fine most of the time, but sometimes this comes up for you. You can say that to everyone. Everyone will go, "Yeah." And it's kind of sad because it only works because we don't know each other. Once you know that everyone feels like that, then you don't feel alone anymore. But, yeah, it is, and there's stuff like that. There's this amazing book. It's called Passages, and it was written like in the 1960s, I think. It's basically like it breaks down stages of life. So it says this is what people are like in their 20s to 30s, and this is what they're like in their 30s to 40s and 40s to 50s and so on. And it says things like that. And you will read the book and it will resonate with you at every stage. You're like, oh, this book just knows me. And when I was learning, I went to a course, like a seminar on cold reading. And that was one of the books that was recommended. It's just this new age, wacky, pop psychology book. But if you read that book and repeat back to people things that are said in that book, everyone will connect with them because we're all really, really similar and we're all struggling with the same human struggles. And and that's what I mean about people like psychics distancing people from their communities and from each other, because they're saying, only I, the psychic with the funny hat, can tell you these deep truths about yourself. When actually you could just talk to your mate at the pub and they'd tell you the same stuff if you got honest with each other.
So I think that's like one of my biggest issues is psychics, because I really liked magic and mentalism as a kid. And so like I tried to learn as much as I can. And when I saw that this is the same things that like psychics and mentalists that claim that they have supernatural spiritualism or whatever, they're using the same tricks, it really bothered me.
Yeah. I think I have I go even further in my dislike of these sort of people, because I think some people who call themselves mentalists even are kind of suggesting that they have something beyond a normal, like they almost elevate cold reading to be supernatural. They're like, oh, I have just this amazing skill of just observing people so closely that I know all these things about them. It's like, no, you don't. You're just making Barnum statements. Mm-hmm. Or you're actually hot reading them. And I hate that. That really frustrates me, because it's like you claim to be against, pretending that there's this supernatural power, but you've just invented another supernatural power, which is called psychology.
Did you keep any of your tarot cards?
Yeah, I still have a couple of sets, actually. I haven't got them out for a long time.
The artwork on some of those is just fucking amazing.
I know, they're beautiful, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah.
They are.
I would really like to learn. One of my projects before I gave up all that crap was I wanted to learn to do tarot card readings with a normal pack of cards. I thought that'd be a really interesting thing to do, because there's something, I like the idea of just using kind of normal everyday objects in a kind of occult way. But yeah.
Have you ever been in a group of skeptics that want to do a tarot reading just for shits and giggles?
Yeah, well, one of the fun things about this, so there's this guy called Ray Hyman. He's amazing. He's like a very prominent skeptic, and he's done a lot of work with cold reading and stuff. So the seminar I went to with him, where he taught us how to cold read, or he taught us the basics that he could in that time, he let us have a go at each other. And I did terribly. It was so shocking to me, because I thought, I'm going to be brilliant at this. I used to do this and really believed it worked. But actually I was really bad, because I was in a room full of Americans, and I made assumptions. So the guy I was speaking to was Californian, and I was like, oh, you really, you have a passion to just experience nature and to be outside more than most people, like to have, that connection, and maybe to feel the fresh air in your lungs and all this stuff. And he was like, no. And I was like, but you're so tanned. How can that not be true? He's like, because I come from California. I was like, oh, yeah. Because any tanned person in the UK would be an outdoorsy person. So maybe that's really good. It's like, oh, so frustrating. But also, I used to do most of my readings on people I knew. So I was just, sorting through information they told me before, and then repackaging it and telling them to it in a slightly nicer way. And also, I think, I was in conversations with a few other skeptics about the idea of, and I still think it's a good idea, but I'll explain it to you and you'll understand the problem, of setting up like a little tarot, or maybe not tarot, maybe just psychic booth, and then sitting in there and doing cold readings for people, and then explaining to them what we just did and giving them their money back and saying, just be prepared next time. But the problem is, it's really, really hard to do a cold reading on someone and not touch. So we started practicing on people, on like friends of friends and stuff. And I would say something like, oh, I see just something really nice and big in your career in the future, and blah, blah, blah. And they'd be like, oh, that was really good, but I don't think you should mention career, because, I've had some problems. So you probably, and I was like, oh God, I don't want to upset you, so I won't mention that. And then the next one I'd be like, okay, fine. So there's some issue with your family, but I feel like it's, and then afterwards we talk it over and they'd be like, well, that was really good, but you shouldn't mention family, because what if someone's just lost someone in their family? Like, okay, I won't mention family. We just started narrowing it down until there was absolutely nothing we could talk about without hurting someone, potentially hurting someone. And so we kind of got stuck at that stage. Because of course, if you really believe you're doing it for real, then you don't worry about hurting people because you don't think you will. And if you're doing it because you're a charlatan, then you don't give a fuck about hurting people because you're a horrible bastard. So but if you're trying to do it, to prove a point, then you're kind of stuck because you've got all these ethical quandaries about touching on topics that might upset people. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it just becomes sort of impossible. But I still think it's a good idea. I like the idea of doing it, but I just don't know how.
I think I've actually seen something like that. Maybe on TV or on the internet or something. But what I was going to ask is, how would you approach like people who say, well, if it's not harming anything and it's making people feel better, and then also on the other side where it is harming people, where they're giving them advice not to go to doctors and stuff like that.
Yeah. So. I think I think the claim that it's not harming anyone is generally untrue. It's just that it's not harming anyone directly. So, which makes it harder, because it's like, well, it makes them, so well, like I've just explained my kind of theoretical objection to psychics, to cold reading psychics, because I feel like they separate people and they prop up this idea that we're all very different. But a better example maybe is like homeopathy. Like people say, oh, well, maybe it kind of works, because of placebo or whatever. And placebo is a whole other issue, because I don't actually think placebo is as wonderful as everyone makes it out to be. I think often it can be explained by regression to the mean, or just people being invested in something they spent money on, so they'll report that they feel better. But anyway, it's not doing any
most
harm.
people do not understand what the placebo effect really is.
Yeah, it's very frustrating, and it becomes like, well, it's like mind over matter, isn't it? It's like, no, it's not. That's exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to explain. But yeah, it's not harming anyone, or it's not harming you in the moment. But that doesn't mean it's not harming you long term, because so if you take your homeopathy for your headache, and then a couple of days later you talk to someone and they say, oh, I've just been diagnosed with cancer, and they say, well, homeopathy worked for my headache, maybe I should suggest it, or maybe I shouldn't object when they bring it up, or maybe I should just like nod, or anything. That can be really dangerous. And it also encourages really, really bad thinking habits, which if you get into the habit of just accepting stuff without like sifting through the evidence for yourself, then you'll end up accepting all sorts of other bullshit, and you end up like me in my teens and early 20s, and I was a mess, and I was really confused, and I couldn't figure out what the truth was, and it was not a nice place to live. It was kind of a scary place to live. So I think it's just like, when people say there's no harm, often there is, and they're just not seeing it. Or it's indirect and more abstract, but it's still quite serious. In fact, in a way, it's kind of more serious because it's like a underlying problem that supports all sorts of dangerous bullshit but can't be seen clearly. And also, I would suggest they go to this brilliant website called whatstheharm.com, which lists all the so many cases of people being hurt by alternative medicine and being scammed out of money by psychics and all that sort of stuff.
Earlier you talked about how you were kind of raised in an atheist family, then kind of fell into finding a religion as a comfort, and then you kind of came back out of it. Well, as someone who's raising a girl right now in an atheist family, what is the best way to keep her atheist? And vegan, I guess, but I'm not worried about that part of it.
Yeah, I think veganism will be easier. Religion is a tempting thing because it offers comfort. So if if she feels like she needs to seek comfort, then I could see her being tempted by it. So the best way to do it is just have a super strong, good, loving family, and then she won't be needing to go elsewhere to get that comfort. But I also think my parents raised me atheist, but not in like an active way. It's more like a passive way. Like we don't have religion, but not. We are critical thinkers, we are atheists, this is important to us, no kind of ideas of humanism or anything. So I think actually thinking of atheism as a positive position as opposed to just an absence of faith, which sounds strange because obviously the word atheism is just absence of faith, but building up kind of a philosophy around that about, like, we're atheists, we don't believe there's anything supernatural, so we're really invested in this real world, and this is important to us. It's important to us when animals suffer, it's important to us. Our relationships are really important to us with our family and our friends because we're not going to get to continue them after we die. Like all this stuff, to make atheism into something positive that gives you a real kind of appreciation and are locked into life and really enjoying it, then she will never want to give that up because it's a wonderful way to live. But if it's just an absence of faith, I think that's easy to drift away from.
One of the things that I find myself struggling with is that we live in a very religious community, and we are constantly finding ourselves saying, well, yes, we don't believe, but they do, and that's okay. And I hate that's okay part of it, because I mean, she's 8. She's not capable of confronting those in a positive manner with her peers. Yeah,
kind of to give her the truth, or it would be complicated and put her in a really difficult position.
I mean, sometimes they'll come out and be like, well, we're not that because we don't hate gay people and we don't hate women, and she hears that stuff, but it's...
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like you're raising your daughter really well, and I'm sure she has probably the strength of character to actually have some of those conversations. I remember having those conversations, and I wasn't even that sure of my atheism, but I remember having conversations with religious kids when I was a kid, and not feeling... It was sometimes awkward, but I never felt like not confident in my position. I was always just like, well, because all of their ideas are silly to me because I've never been taught them. The only reason these things could sound, believable is because you've been indoctrinated them as a child. Mm-hmm. So I think one is probably to have more faith in her and her strength to deal with this stuff. And also, yeah, just to keep the really horrible parts of religion back for a little while until she gets to be an angry teenager. It's when you whip all that stuff out. Whip out the God delusion.
No. You're totally right. I probably should have a lot more faith in her strength.
Faith.
Oh yeah, faith, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not faith if it's based on evidence.
No, but one of the things I've been really like thinking about getting her Richard I can't even say his name.
Dawkins?
Thank you. Book. Was it The Magic of Reality?
I love that book. I have that book. I don't even have a kid to read it to, but it's a beautiful book. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been really thinking about, like, I think she's old enough now to actually dive into it and kind of understand it a little bit more. So
yeah, I see that. I think that would be perfect for an 8-year-old. It's because, again, it's the positive atheism. It's saying, look at how wonderful the world is and how we can appreciate it because it is the only world we get. Yeah, and that's a really positive message instead of just all the anger and negativity of like, oh, how terrible religion is. She can figure that out for herself.
Well, I can't believe we're already past an hour. That just flew by.
I spoke terribly fast. I've been really trying to slow down because I always get told off for speaking too fast, but I've got so many ideas and so little time.
No, I think it's been fantastic. How can people follow your work, get involved, and see what you're doing?
Sure, they can check out rvgn.org, which is our website, and we're actually going to revamp it in the new year. At the moment, it's just a blog with articles, which are brilliant and interesting, but we're hoping to make it into something a bit more community orientated, so that's coming up. And also follow us on Twitter, which is rvgn_org. And we tweet all the new articles, and we also tweet everything like links to interesting kind of skeptical takes on veganism and the occasional cartoon and silliness as well. So, yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, we end every episode saying fuck, shit, damn. Would you mind saying it for us this week?
Certainly. I've been looking forward to it. Fuck, shit, damn.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Well, you have a wonderful night.
Oh, thank you so much. You have a good day.
This week you heard
Trapdoor by Jake One.
Right now you're listening to
Rotator by Moby.
iTunes. Huge shout out to Tiff Otter for leaving us an amazing review. Previous guest, actually. One of the many nice things she said in her review is that this is a must-listen podcast for her every single week. So thank you so much.
If you would like to leave a review, you should do so. It really helps us out.
So much, actually. So just, head on over to iTunes, give us a couple stars, write a couple nice things, or not.
Give us 5 stars. A couple stars isn't nice.
Yeah. It just really helps out the show. And it doesn't cost you anything. It only takes a minute out of your day, and you only have to do it once. So, thank you to everyone who's done it, and thank you to everyone who's going to do it.
If you've already done it, you can also grab someone else's device, subscribe to the show, and rate and review us. They'll like it. It's free content. What's better than free?
What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Speaking of things that go wrong, social media. Be our friend on it. That's it. We have all of the ones that most people use. So, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr.
One time it was said that if you are a friend on our social media, we'd give you a hug in real life. I'm going to reiterate that. If you're a friend on our social media and we meet in real life, you got a hug.
You also find out about things like the store before everyone else does on the show. Because we often talk about things on our social media that we don't talk about on the show.
Often, you mean every day.
Yeah,
every day.
Pretty much, yeah. Be our friend, follow us, obey us, and we will rule the world together. Fuck shit, damn.
Well said.
Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective, with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to whichsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.